Have you ever wondered if the person you love most could also be the one who makes you afraid? I used to think like you that every child is innocent, that family problems are just a phase that will eventually pass. But sometimes it's the smallest signs, the whispers in the dark, those strange glances that grow larger and larger until the day you realize the worst nightmare doesn't come from outside, it starts right inside your own home. In today's story, I'll share with you the journey of a father, a journey I never wished to take. When my daughter's imaginary friend stopped being a harmless game, when sleepless nights were no longer just about childhood fevers, but a real fear of my own daughter, fear of what she might do to her little brother, fear of a world where no one believes you. If you've ever thought family is always the safest place, listen to this story until the end. Because sometimes the most terrifying truth is this: some children are not innocent at all. Chapter 1: Mr. Patches and the First Tea Party. If anyone ever asked me about my daughter Emma, I'd say she's the kind of child you'd easily overlook on the playground. Tiny, painfully shy, always avoiding strangers' gazes, and sometimes even leaving me baffled with her complete silence. Emma rarely spoke, not even to her own parents. That's why when she began whispering to herself in her room, I just thought it was the usual make-believe play kids do. I can still clearly remember that afternoon, standing outside the school fence watching the yard. Emma was sitting under a tree, spreading out a small cloth, arranging some old dolls and a set of plastic teacups. But what broke my heart wasn't that lonely tea party. It was the way Emma giggled, turning toward the empty seats, telling jokes, as if someone was actually answering her. Honestly, for a moment, I felt relieved. She'd never had close friends, rarely got invited to anyone's birthday parties, always hovering around her mother and me. Seeing Emma becoming bolder, imagining a friend, I convinced myself it was a big step forward. At that point, I had no idea that my daughter's new friend would be the start of a nightmare that to this day, I can hardly believe our family actually went through. The name Mr. Patches first came up when Emma carried her glass of milk into the living room, beaming as she told her mom, "Mr. Patches says it's a beautiful day." We laughed, thinking it must be all those cartoons, or maybe just another new role-play game. My wife, Sarah, even seemed happy that Emma was finally talking more, even if it was to someone no one else could see. That night, Emma started sharing stories about Mr. Patches, a tall man in black clothes with weirdly long arms and legs and lots of eyes all over his body. I asked Emma what he looked like, and she grabbed some paper and started drawing. What she made sent chills down my spine. A pitch black figure face, blurred limbs, covered in random eyes, standing beside a tiny girl who seemed to be Emma herself. Honestly, it creeped me out a bit, but I still chalked it up to a kid's imagination. Sometimes kids dream up pretty strange things. Over the next few days, Mr. Patches started turning up in every conversation Emma had. He knows all the secrets in the house, always watches and protects Emma, and even whispers her advice that honestly made me laugh. "Don't eat carrots today, or you'll get a stomach ache." Sarah just brushed it off, thinking the more we paid attention, the longer Emma would cling to this game. I felt the same, just hoping she'd get bored and move on. But then things began to change. Emma talked to her imaginary friend more and more, grew more confident, and even dared to strike up conversations with strangers if Mr. Patches came up, as if he was really right there beside her. I used to think imaginary friends were just harmless childhood games, but the truth is some games that start out innocent can end up dragging an entire family into a nightmare with no escape. If I'd known, then maybe I wouldn't have just stood outside the fence, quietly watching my daughter's lonely tea party. Because Mr. Patches, or whatever it was that my daughter was seeing, was never truly alone. Chapter 2: When Imaginary Friends Stop Being Harmless. I don't remember exactly when Mr. Patches' name started popping up in every corner of our house. At first, I found it amusing, Emma mumbling to the air, sometimes even changing her voice like she was acting out a whole play by herself. But things only truly caught my attention when Sarah began to complain that Emma's new friends from school had suddenly stopped coming over to play. Sarah tried to ask the other parents, but all she got were vague answers. The kids get a little scared when they're at Emma's house. When I asked Emma, she just smiled and said, "Mr. Patches doesn't like my friends being noisy. He says they breathe too loud." I had to stifle a laugh, thinking kids really do have wild imaginations. But the seriousness in her eyes, the way Emma looked at me and then immediately turned away, made me feel like something was a bit off. We kept trying to ignore it, like any parent hoping, "It's just a phase, it'll pass." But with each passing day, Emma spent longer and longer with her door closed, talking to herself for hours, sometimes bursting into laughter, or even having heated arguments with someone only she could hear. There was one time walking past Emma's room, I accidentally overheard her speaking, in a voice I didn't recognize, hoarse, slow-laced with menace. It was definitely not a child's voice, more like someone pretending to be an adult. I stood there in silence for a few seconds outside her door, feeling my heart sink as I heard Emma switch back to her innocent voice, replying to her imaginary friend. Every time that happened, I tried to reassure myself. She must be watching too many movies. That's all. One night while cleaning up Emma's room, Sarah found a stack of drawings. I remember it vividly. She ran out to the kitchen from Emma's room, her face pale, as if she'd seen a ghost. In her hands was a family portrait, me, Sarah, Emma, baby Jake, and a tall, shadowy figure, pitch black, with too many arms and too many eyes. The most striking thing, baby Jake, our youngest son, had a bright red X marked over his eyes, as if someone had tried to erase his life. At the bottom of the page, in Emma's clumsy, childish handwriting, it read, "Stir Patches says Jake will get to meet him soon." A chill ran down my spine, though I still tried to calm my wife. "She's just doodling, that's all." But Sarah didn't buy it. For the first time, she was truly terrified, crying and repeating over and over, "Something's not right with our daughter." We decided to ask Emma that very night. To our surprise, Emma just beamed the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face and chirped, "That's right, Daddy. Do you like it? Mr. Patches lives inside all of us now." In that moment, for the first time, I truly felt something beyond my own imagination. This was no longer a child's game, no longer just made-up stories for fun. For the first time, I was afraid, and I regretted ever dismissing all those little signs right in our own home. Chapter 3, Alarming Signs. After the night, Sarah and I discovered that drawing the atmosphere in our house changed dramatically. I started paying much closer attention to everything Emma did. Honestly, I should have done this much sooner, but when your own daughter becomes the biggest question mark in your life, that feeling is both painful and terrifying. First, there were the nights when Emma no longer slept soundly like before. Around 3 a.m., the motion sensor in the hallway would go off. At first, I thought it was the cat, or maybe Sarah going to the bathroom, until I checked the security camera footage. It was Emma. She was wandering the house in the dark, quietly opening every window, then standing perfectly still, smiling and gesturing as if inviting someone inside. Sometimes Emma would spread her arms wide and then wrap them around empty air as if hugging an invisible friend. I didn't know whether to be scared for my daughter or for my entire family. In the days that followed, I tried to talk to Emma, hoping she'd admit it was just the mischief of a kid who'd watched too many ghost stories. But Emma would only give the same monotonous reply, as if reciting from memory, "I'm helping Mr. Patches meet Jake. He says my brother needs to see the truth." I wanted to let it go, but Sarah just couldn't. The tipping point came on what should have been an ordinary afternoon. Sarah was making a bottle for Jake when suddenly I heard her scream from the kitchen. I rushed in to find Sarah shaking, clutching the baby's bottle in her hand, while Emma stood at the edge of the table, her face perfectly calm. It turned out that while Sarah wasn't looking, Emma had secretly put eye drops into her baby brother's bottle. I demanded to know what Emma had done. She just answered softly, "It's just water, Dad. Mr. Patches says Jake needs to see him." That overwhelming dread hit me. Sarah broke down completely sobbing and screaming at Emma. But at that moment, Emma screamed back a piercing, shrill scream, so sharp I thought the window glass might shatter. "You ruin everything. I hate you, Mom." I had never seen my daughter look so ferocious. Sarah recoiled, her face ashen. That was when I knew we couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I tried to keep calm, coaxed Emma to apologize to her mother, and told her very clearly that what she was doing was hurting our family. Instead of crying or arguing, Emma suddenly lunged and clawed at Sarah's face, shouting, "You're just jealous because he loves me more." When I pulled Emma away from my wife, she bolted straight into her room, shoved her dresser against the door, and screamed from inside, "I'm sorry. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry. I love you." Hearing her voice repeating over and over from that dark room sent chills down my spine. I wasn't just scared for Emma anymore. I was terrified because I realized my daughter was slipping further and further out of our reach and maybe out of the arms of her own parents. Chapter 4: When Parents Are Powerless. Watching their child spiral out of control. After the night Sarah's face was scratched by our daughter, I had to take my wife to the clinic to have her wound stitched up. Sarah cried the whole way, asking me over and over what's wrong with our daughter. How did she become like this? I didn't know how to answer. It was the most helpless I'd ever felt, afraid for my child and afraid for my whole family. That night, Sarah lay on the bed, her face bandaged, Jake asleep in his crib nearby, and I sat lost in the living room, straining to catch every small sound in the house. My mind kept running through everything that had happened, Emma's eyes before she slammed her door shut, her voice repeating, "I'm sorry. I love you, Mom." Again and again, pure desperation. I knew Emma was deeply troubled, but that turmoil had now become a real danger. Around 2 in the morning, while the whole house was exhausted and sleep deprived, I suddenly heard a strange static noise coming from Jake's baby monitor. My heart pounded. I jumped up and rushed to the baby's room. I will never forget that scene. Emma was standing silently by Jake's crib, holding a large pair of scissors. Her eyes were vacant, fixed on her baby brother's face, like she was sleepwalking. I managed to rush over just in time, as Emma muttered, "Mr. Patches says, if I fix Jake's eyes, he'll always be able to see him." I lunged for the scissors, but Emma resisted with a shocking strength, so small, yet it felt like her power came from a storm of madness. When I finally pinned Emma down, she shrieked and screamed, "He says this is the only way he'll forgive me. Jake has to see him." It was a horrifying scene. I had to wrestle my own daughter to the ground, struggling to control those tiny flailing arms, while Sarah ran in her face, still bandaged, screaming in desperation. Right then I heard police sirens blaring outside. In the chaos, I realized the neighbors must have called 911 after hearing all the screaming. When the officers burst in, they found me pinning Emma to the floor, scissors lying nearby. Emma sobbing, "Daddy, you're hurting me. Please don't hurt me. Daddy, I just want to play with my brother." The police restrained me, a nurse checked on Emma, and Sarah tried to explain about Mr. Patches, the drawings, everything, but no one listened. To them, all they saw was a little girl abused by her father, a mother with a bandaged face, a sleeping newborn in his crib, and I became a dangerous man overnight. I was separated from Emma and Sarah right at the hospital. A social worker came to question me, her tone cold and clinical, while through the glass I could see Emma coloring, smiling, and chatting with the nurses, as if nothing terrifying had just happened. "Your daughter says you hurt her," the social worker said gently. She's told every staff member the same thing very consistently. She also said your wife was too scared to intervene. I knew then Emma had prepared exactly what she needed to say. She was only 7, but her words weren't those of a child. Every detail she described was logical, convincing enough to make anyone who didn't know the truth believe her. And that was the moment I realized my daughter wasn't just a danger to her baby brother, but a danger to our whole family. Because for Emma, truth was just a curtain, and behind it, she could weave any story she wanted, even destroy the very people who brought her into this world. Chapter 5: When a young manipulator destroys every ounce of trust. After that horrifying night, everything in my family was turned upside down. Emma was transferred to a special observation room at the hospital, while I was detained for hours, questioned by social workers and police. Sarah clung to Jake, her eyes red and face haunted, repeating over and over, "Please, you have to help my daughter. She needs help. She's not the victim here." But who would believe that all anyone saw was a skinny 7-year-old girl with red marks on her arms, crying with big lost eyes? Emma told the same story to everyone from nurses to doctors, social workers, to police officers. Her account never changed. My dad went crazy when I played with Jake. He held my hand so tight it hurt. My mom was too scared to say anything. I wanted to scream, to explode with rage, but the more I did, the more I made myself look like the villain. The worst moment was when I was allowed to see Emma. Through the glass, she was drawing pictures for the nurses, telling jokes, even putting on a show of being scared at just the right moments to win everyone's sympathy. In their eyes, my daughter was a poor, abused victim, and I was the unstable, dangerous one. For the first time in my life, I understood what it was like to be cornered by my own child. That night, during her psychological evaluation, Emma never mentioned Mr. Patches, not a single word about her imaginary friend. She played the role of the normal little girl with a chilling perfection. When the social worker brought Sarah and me in to see Emma, she ran up, hugged us tightly, apologizing and saying she missed home. But when it was just the 3 of us, Emma looked straight at me and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Mr. Patches says, you're starting to understand now." I felt my blood run cold. Sarah pulled Emma closer, choking back tears, and I just stood there in silence. That was no longer my daughter. We were forced to agree to another 72 hours of observation for Emma, our hearts in turmoil, with Jake still so little at home. That night, I quietly went back searching through Emma's room and found a secret notebook behind her bookshelf. Inside were dozens of meticulously detailed pages, our family's daily routines notes on who was absent, and when a map of Jake's room, instructions on opening doors without drawing attention. My hands trembled as I kept flipping through page after page of drawings, elaborate plans not just about Jake, but also about Sarah and me. At the very end was a picture of 3 gravestones marked with dates and scribbled letters. "Mr. Patches says, this is the order." I called Sarah in, and together we cried. There was nothing to do but photograph everything as evidence, then lock the notebook away in a drawer. But all I felt was utter despair. Who would believe us? A smart, manipulative 7-year-old who could fool the world while we were slowly being painted as 2 lunatics in society's eyes. The next morning, when the Child Protective Services worker came to inspect, I had to play the calm, collected father. Sarah had to hide the scratches on her face, and we made sure the house was spotless. They took photos of every room, asked about our meal plans, checked the medicine cabinet and every lock. We smiled and answered everything, terrified that even one wrong word would only make us look more suspicious. After the inspection, we just sat on the kitchen floor in silence, staring at each other. I remembered the peaceful days before all we ever worried about were diapers, low fevers, or school grades, and my heart ached. No one said it out loud, but I knew. From that day forward, our family would never be the same again. Chapter 6: Despair and an Unbelievable Truth. I don't think I ever truly understood the word helplessness until that time in my life. My family, once a safe haven, had become a silent battlefield where every glance was wary and every small sound sent waves of dread through the house. Emma was still in the hospital, but I knew deep down one small slip, and she'd be back, and everything would start all over again. Sarah was exhausted, caring for Jake, trying to fend off prying phone calls from relatives, friends, even Emma's teachers. Everyone repeated the same old polite lines. Let us know if you need anything. But I could feel the distance in their voices. They saw us as strangers now, just another troubled couple from those child abuse headlines. Obsessed, I decided to search every single corner of the house. I didn't expect to find not one, but two more notebooks, one hidden in Emma's stuffed pillow, another stuffed behind the kitchen drawer. Inside those pages were dozens of scenarios, different ways to sneak into Jake's room, plans for picking locks, even notes on how to make adults believe you're the real victim. Emma had carefully written down every expression, every phrase she should use when talking to doctors or teachers. As I read, I was chilled to the bone, unable to believe the level of cold calculation and imagination a 7-year-old could reach. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears, nearly collapsing when she turned to a page where Emma had drawn Jake with a row of red X's over his eyes, and the note. Mr. Patches says, "It's almost time." We gathered all the evidence, put it together into a thick file, and hoped someone somewhere would listen and help. But when we tried to reach out to the first psychologist, they just repeated the same emotionless advice children sometimes act out when their environment changes, especially with a new sibling. You should focus on creating a stable, positive atmosphere and encourage Emma to express herself through art or music. I wanted to scream at them. No, you don't understand. My daughter isn't just jealous. She's planning this. She's manipulating everyone. But I knew saying that would only make me look more suspicious. Sarah's spirit faded with each day. She quit her job, unable to focus on anything but Jake. All day she hovered near him, locked every door, taped up. The outlets hid every knife and sharp object in the house. As for me, I was living like a ghost, working online, obsessively checking the cameras, researching foreign psychiatric specialists, joining support groups for parents of children with behavioral disorders. Each day I felt myself more and more isolated. Friends and colleagues drifted away. Family split into two camps, those who sided with Emma thinking we were too strict, and those who believed us but had no idea how to help. Once, even Sarah's sister called, scolding, "You're ruining that child's life." Every night, I'd curl up in a corner of the house, holding Jake, listening to Sarah crying quietly in the bathroom, haunted by a single question: does this nightmare end? And is there anyone besides my wife and me who could ever believe the horrifying truth about a 7-year-old child? Chapter 7: Seeking Help. When hope is almost gone. Finally, when it felt like all hope in our family was nearly gone, we decided to try one more time to seek out true specialists, even though deep down we knew there was a good chance we'd be dismissed or ignored. Just explaining to someone what Emma had done, the evidence we had collected, felt like a battle. No one wanted to believe that a 7-year-old girl could be so calculating, so coldly orchestrate things, or even script out how to frame her own parents. In the first few weeks, the doctors only looked at Sarah and me with suspicion, repeating the same questions over and over. Have you ever raised your voice at your daughter, ever sent her to her room? As punishment, does anyone in the family have a history of psychological disorders? They listened to our story, nodded, flipped through a few pages of our thick folder, and then concluded, "We'll arrange for Emma to attend group therapy and, in the meantime, advise the whole family to try to relax and not be too stressed." It was a crushing feeling, fragile and infuriating all at once. The more details I shared, the more I was treated as a paranoid father, while Sarah became the classic, anxious, possibly postpartum mother. I used to think this only happened in movies, parents begging for help, while the world doubts or turns its back. Now, we were the main characters in that very tragedy. And just when we were about to give up a woman, the nurse from the pediatric clinic where Jake was being monitored called me. Her voice was gentle but firm. "I've seen a case like yours before. I can't be certain, but there's a doctor named Chen who's very experienced with children showing complex behavioral disorders. I think you should give her a try." Just hearing that name, Sarah and I latched onto it like a lifeline. After weeks of waiting, we finally got an appointment with Dr. Chen. From the very first meeting, I sensed something different. She didn't just listen. She observed quietly, taking notes on every small reaction from Emma, every facial expression from Sarah and me. Instead of dry theoretical questions, Dr. Chen created simulated situations to see how Emma would reveal herself. Emma, for her part, kept up her performance, working even harder, knowing when to smile, how much to answer, never revealing anything about Mr. Patches or her disturbing plans. But somehow I felt Dr. Chen could see the tiny cracks in that perfect mask. After 3 sessions, Dr. Chen was blunt with us. "Your daughter shows signs of social manipulation far beyond what's normal for her age. I recommend immediate inpatient treatment for the safety of your family, especially Jake." Sarah broke down in tears, and I nearly collapsed from a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that someone finally believed us, but terrified, because it meant Emma would be separated from the family, at least for a long while. We started handling paperwork, working with insurance, borrowing money, even considering selling our house, if that's what it took to afford her treatment. Meanwhile, Emma's behavior changed completely. She became strangely obedient, polite, even apologizing to us, hugging Jake through the locked door and whispering, "I'll try to be a better big sister." But it was precisely that unnatural obedience that chilled me even more than Emma's outbursts ever had. Because I knew behind all that silence, my daughter was already preparing her next move, and this might only be the tip of a much larger iceberg. Chapter 8. The Final Confrontation. The Truth Revealed. On the day Emma was taken from our home for inpatient treatment, I thought I'd feel relief, maybe even a sense of freedom. But in reality, all I felt was a kind of indescribable emptiness. Sarah cried herself to exhaustion, and all I could do was hold Jake even tighter, as if letting my guard down for even a second might bring everything crashing back down on us. But it didn't end there. Before Emma could be transferred, the law required us to go to court, partly to confirm her treatment, partly to hear from the experts, and to revisit the accusations Emma had made. I had never feared a courtroom like I did then. Not because of the law itself, but because my own daughter, only 7 years old, was capable of crafting narratives more sophisticated than most adults. The hearing was tense. Emma was seated apart, speaking to the judge via video link, putting on an act of obedience and carefully timed emotion. She spoke about how her parents didn't love her, always locked the doors, left her hungry, and then, almost on cue, tears welled up as she described her fear of coming home. The social workers and psychologists, who had failed to see the real problem, gave ambivalent opinions, sympathetic to us, but unwilling to fully challenge Emma's story. But when it was Dr. Chen's turn to speak, I saw that she never wavered. Every observation, every small detail about Emma was cited meticulously. How Emma calculated her behavior, charmed adults, fabricated evidence, and even understood the loopholes in the child welfare system. She spoke bluntly. "If intervention doesn't happen, I believe Emma will continue to escalate and may become a real danger to her own family." But perhaps the biggest shock came when Emma, realizing the tide had turned, completely changed her demeanor. Through the screen, her voice grew steady, all traces of fear gone, and she became cold, unnaturally calm for her age. Mr. Patches, taught me how to wait, how to make people believe what I say. If I have to stay here longer, I'll come up with something else. Don't worry, I always have time." The whole courtroom fell silent. The judge glanced at Sarah and me, and all I could do was hold Jake and wonder if I had really heard what I thought I had. In the end, with all the evidence, The notebook's expert testimony failed interventions. The court ruled that Emma must be admitted to a special psychiatric hospital with strict security measures to prevent any contact with Jake or anyone else who might be at risk. When Emma was escorted to the transport vehicle, she didn't cry or scream. She just turned to look at me for a long time. In that moment, for the first time through this whole ordeal, her eyes weren't those of a child anymore. They were the eyes of someone fully in control of everything around her. The van door closed. I clearly heard Emma say to the escort, her voice light as air, Mr. Patches will wait patiently." That day I understood that sometimes the harshest truth isn't about who's right or wrong, but having to accept that some children, even your own, can become the greatest threat to those who love them most. Chapter 9. Living on after the nightmare. In the first days after Emma left home, I just couldn't get used to the emptiness. The house suddenly felt eerily quiet. Every time I passed by her room, I'd hesitate, afraid to open the door, unable to look at the row of stuffed animals the comic books scattered about, as if Emma had only just stepped out for a moment. Sarah quietly held Jake, more often excessively careful, as if letting go for even a second would bring danger rushing back. Some nights I'd wake to find my wife rocking Jake, crying and whispering apologies, apologizing for not protecting him better. As for me, I still checked the windows, locked every door each night, a habit that felt ingrained in my bones, even though I knew that now only those truly safe remained in this house. A few weeks later, Jake started to smile again. He began babbling, clinging to his mother, no longer frightened by every sudden sound. I knew it was a good sign, a reminder that while this trauma would linger for a long time, a family can still heal as long as we give ourselves enough time. We were still allowed to visit Emma once a month in a sterile white room with the thick glass walls and a silent staff member in the corner. Emma never once showed any sign of remorse. She would ask about Jake, tell us about her new lessons at the center, sometimes draw pictures for us, but most of those drawings were strange, always with a dark figure lurking in the corner of the page, or a doll with X's drawn over its eyes. It hurt, but I understood there would never be any such thing as going back to how things were. My family, like so many others I met in support groups, had to learn to love our child from afar, learn to live with fear, and most of all, learn to forgive ourselves. We had to accept being a parent doesn't mean you always know how to protect your child. Not every child is born an angel. And sometimes to keep everyone safe, you have to make the kind of choice that shatters your heart. Maybe I'll never be able to answer the question, if I could go back to the beginning, would I do anything differently? But I do know, this painful as it is, I would choose Jake again. I would choose life and safety for the innocent child, even if it means losing Emma forever. Chapter 10. Beyond the Shadows. A message after the nightmare. If you're still listening at this point, maybe you're like me, someone who once believed that family was the ultimate fortress, that with enough love every tragedy could be overcome. But the truth is, sometimes the greatest fears come from within, from those we gave life to, nurtured and pinned all our hopes on. I'm not telling this story to ask for sympathy, nor to blame anyone. Instead, I hope that somewhere out there, any parent who has ever felt desperate, tormented by the sense that something isn't right with their child, will know you're not alone. There are pains that no one wants to name, the pain of having to protect one child from their own sibling, the pain of choosing safety over affection, the pain of facing a doubting society, losing friends, or even being turned away by family. For me, the greatest lesson is this: not every child can simply be loved into healing. Some disorders, some dangerous behaviors need to be recognized and stopped early, even if that means becoming the bad guy in the eyes of the community. I've lost Emma, or rather I've lost the version of my daughter I once knew. But I still hope that someday somewhere Emma will truly be healed, will rediscover something of the childhood she lost so long ago. As for me, I will keep living, keep loving Jake, keep practicing forgiveness for myself, for Emma, and for all the dark days our family had to endure. If you've ever been in a place where no one believes you, ever felt so hopeless you began to doubt yourself, I just want to say, don't give up. Seek help. Protect the ones you love at all costs. And if anyone out there is listening to this story, I hope you'll hug your children a little tighter, pay closer attention to the small changes in their eyes and voices, because sometimes just a little observation and the courage to ask questions could prevent a nightmare like the one my family lived through. Thank you for listening to this story. And if you ever have to choose between safety and love, remember some decisions may break your heart, but they just might save a life. If you've listened this far, thank you for taking the time to follow a journey that wasn't easy, not just my own pain, but the pain of families most people never want to talk about. Maybe some will judge, some will argue, some won't believe, or simply refuse to believe. But the truth is, not every family is perfect. Not every child can be healed by love alone. I share this story not to blame, not to point fingers. I only hope that if you've ever felt alone, ever had to choose between safety and affection, ever been doubted by society, you'll understand you are not alone. There are tragedies that break your heart, but sometimes the most painful choice is the only right one to protect those you love. Don't be afraid to seek help. Don't be afraid to question even the smallest changes in your family. And if one day you ever have to choose between your own children, remember, no one has the right to judge you but yourself. Thank you for listening. See you again in the next stories of True Reddit Reads.